All right, so earlier this week we got an upgrade to the NIS Elements software. Most people are familiar with this version of NIS Elements, and it now looks like this. So at a glance you can see it's pretty different, but there are a lot of really familiar aspects just in slightly different places. So we're going to walk through real quick how to translate this old layout into this new layout. So getting started, the first thing you probably do when you set up with a microscope is you engage the eye port and you get your sample in focus by eye. On the old layout, you would do that by hitting the eye port button, doing your eye port stuff, and hitting the eye port button again to disengage it. In the new software, you have these kind of tabs along the top. You have the Nikon A1 tab that has all your laser parameters. You have the eyepiece DIA, which is the white light that comes from the top of the microscope. And then you have the eyepiece EPI, which uses the colored fluorescent lamp, which is what most people are going to be using at this microscope usually. So if you hit the eyepiece EPI tab, it now disengages all of your laser stuff, and this has engaged the eye port on the actual microscope itself. Currently, an error that's happening is that it gives you this little error. It says, please switch passive devices to current light path positions, dummy to position 1. This does not mean anything. We're going to make this not happen in the future, but until then, you just hit OK and do nothing about it. Once you're on the eyepiece tab, you have your little tabbies here, so DABI, GFP, Psi3, and as I'm clicking these, it is going through the filter wheel on the microscope itself and changing that epifluorescent light. The filter switcher that's on the right-hand side of the microscope base is also still able to be used. It's whichever you're more comfortable with. Once you have your sample in focus and you're done with the eyepiece, you come back over here to the Nikon A1 tab and you click it. This disengages the eye port and re-engages all of your laser stuff. In the past, you had this interlock kind of thing, and we always had it so that the interlock automatically turned off anytime you were not using the eye port, and that's how it should be, and we're probably going to do that again in the future, but right now it's not set up to do that. So right here you have this remove interlock button. Anytime you've swapped from the eyepiece to the Nikon A1 tab, you have to click this remove interlock to remove the interlock. You cannot use the lasers with this remove interlock button on, so just make sure it's off before you begin. So the next thing you're probably want to go to do is go from top to bottom, all of your normal little things here that you set up. So we have your pixel dwell here. We sometimes also call it exposure time. That's not technically correct, but it's something we often say. We generally recommend you start at 1.1. So the higher the pixel dwell, the longer it will take to take an image, but the brighter your resulting image will be. This is now over here called dwell time. And instead of being a button, it's now a slider. 1.1 is the lowest one. And right below that, you have your image size. 1024 by 1024 is typical publishing standard. That is now over here. So 1024 by 1024 is this one right here. Right below that, you have this normal line averaging and line integration. Line integration has been totally booted from this little hot list. Line averaging is now this slider right here. So what averaging does is it takes 1, 2, 4, 8, or 16 pictures of exactly the same thing, compares all of those pictures, and any pixel that is not exactly the same in all of those pictures gets averaged in intensity. If you do not want to do that, and you basically live your life with it on the normal setting, you want averaging to be set to 1. Right below that, you have the channel series button. We basically always say the channel series should be on. So what channel series does is you have your 4 laser lines and you have your fluorescent markers, and the fluorescent markers respond to particular excitations. So the way this is supposed to work, if you have channel series engaged, is that it engages the first laser line, which activates your first fluorescence, and then it collects all that information, turns off that first laser line, turns on the next laser line, collects that fluorescence, turns it off, etc. The reason why you would want to do it like that is because you have fluorescent markers where if you just turn them all on at the same time and you collected all of the information at the same time, that's just going to be like a mess and you won't be able to really differentiate between anything, especially if you're doing 4-color imaging, which a lot of people on this system are. But if you're not doing 4-color imaging, then you don't need to have that channel series turned on. The only benefit to not having it turned on is that it goes faster, but a lot of people can't use that. Anyway, channel series is right here. It's now called channel mode, and you have a couple different options. This first button, where all of them are in a line, is exactly what it seems like. So all 4 of your fluorescence is going to respond to all of the lasers at the same time. Everything turns on, everything is collected. If you have 4-color imaging, this is just going to be like a big old mess of bleed through, and it's not going to be particularly useful. If you only have 1 color, or you only have like 2 colors that are very far apart on the spectrum, this is the fastest mode, so you can use it, but most people using the A1s can't actually use this mode. The next tab over is like a staggered, so it looks like it would do the DAPI and the Sci3 at the same time, and the 488 and the Sci5 at the same time. Depending on what your fluorophores are, you might be able to get away with this. And then you have your full-on channel series where it only does 1 color at a time. So this one on the end is exactly as you're used to, where it does your DAPI, then your FITSI, then your TRITSI, then your Sci5. If you don't know what you're supposed to be using, go ahead and use this last mode. It is the slowest, but it's also kind of the most universal. On just the Spectral A1, you're going to have the option between resonance and galvano. Most people are going to want galvano. My screenshot does not have that, but it used to be right up here in the corner. And then you have your pinhole. So pinhole, we often recommend you go to 1.2 AU. That is now down here. Here's your 1.2. You then have your standard 4 colors, where you have HV offset laser percentage with this checkbox. The way this often worked is that if you did not want to use any of these 4 colors, you would hit the checkbox and that would disengage it like how Sci5 is. Now you have these little tabs up here. So if you did not want to use the Sci5, you would click this Sci5 button and that kind of collapses down the Sci5. Works exactly the same, just in a slightly different position. That's not to be confused with these little buttons on the side. So these little buttons are now the equivalent of hitting these little buttons. So what these buttons did is they turned off the laser itself. It didn't prevent the software from imaging in that color. It just prevented the laser itself from turning on. So that's what these buttons do. And these are not the same thing as collapsing it down with these buttons. In the previous setup, you had HV, offset, and then your laser percentage. In your new version, that's actually upside down. So you have your laser percentage, offset, and HV is on the bottom. It's now called gain. It works exactly the same. It's just inversed. Ooh, not that. Let's see, you have your nose piece here. Works exactly the same. It's just now up here. All of this stuff that you probably ignored is still here. It's just also up here. Your A1 scan area, your little preview thing, is up here with your zoom and your Nyquist in XY. That is all now right here. So your preview, your zoom, your Nyquist XY. Your ND acquisition is still exactly the same. It's just a floating panel. Nothing here has changed at all, so this should all be very familiar. And then your LUTs are right here. LUTs are now right here. And as far as functionality goes, there's one more thing, which is scan. This is how you previously turned on the lasers, is now live. So there you go. And that's pretty much it as far as differences go. I'm kind of anticipating the biggest thing is going to be adjusting to your laser being on the top and your HV being on the bottom, and also having to come to the eyepiece tab, and then instead of disengaging it via a button, you have to come back over to the Nikon A1 tab and then manually remove the interlock. Other than that, everything is pretty much just the same. So thank you for joining me, and always let us know if you need any help.